Okay, I guess let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Today we will be talking about analysis of Zionism as an ideology. We did change it up a little bit because it was originally called a comparative analysis between Judaism and Zionism, but now we want to just uh, analyze what the Zionist ideology is. Our presenter is Sally Hunt. She is She got her bachelor's at the University of Missouri in psychology, and then she has her master's in education also from the University of Missouri. And so, yeah, I'll pass it on to Sally.
Thank you, Rev. Yeah, hi. My name is Sally Hunt, and yeah, and I know I saw somebody at one point had asked about the colleges that I graduated from, and yes, they are both University of Missouri, but one is University of Missouri Columbia for my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then my master's is the University of Missouri St. Louis. Just for anyone who cares about that. um, and yeah, my master's is in counseling, and I am a Jew. I am an Ashkenazi Jew. I will talk a little bit more about that, and I certainly am very interested, very passionate about this topic. So, did you want to? Should I just jump right in, or did you want to say anything else? Jump right in. Sounds good to me. Okay, so let me open this up. Okay, so you can see this. I take it. I can't hear, but I'm I know I'm screen sharing, so
Yes.
I'm just
Oh, yeah,
yes,
we can
okay,
see it.
wonderful. I was gonna say I'm assuming you can, but all right. This is an analysis of Zionism as an ideology. I want you to be thinking about this. And so I have here in smaller print, what does it mean to be a Jew versus to be a Zionist? Obviously, this question is of interest to me specifically being a Jew, and I think you will see very quickly why this is of interest to me. So, just a little bit about myself. I already mentioned my education and my master's in counseling. So, I tell people I am an ethnic Jew. And I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. I will talk a little bit more here in a second about what that means because a lot of people probably don't know what that means. It is not, mainstream, not commonly used. I think we're starting to hear that term more and more since October 7th, but I'll talk more about that here in a second. But I am a Jew by ethnicity. Both of my parents are Ashkenazi Jews. My family is all Ashkenazi Jews. Um, I also consider myself to be, I of the culture as well in terms of I grew up, we did, certain Jewish traditions. I am an atheist. So for me personally, I am not a religious Jew. I do not believe in the religion of Judaism. I just always want to put that out there because some people don't understand how I am a Jew if I'm also an atheist. And so I'll talk more about this here in just a minute, but just know that there are different ways a person can be a Jew. There's different ways that somebody is Jewish. And so I'll get more into that here in a second. But this is just a little bit about me and my interests and the things that I talk a lot about. I focus on power structures and any inherent structural power imbalances in society. I like to highlight the root causes of societal and worldwide problems through the lens of an internationalist, pro indigenous, anti racist, class based, materialist analysis. I emphasize that all systems of oppression are inextricably linked to each other. So I don't believe that we can only focus on one oppressed group, one system of oppression without understanding how they are all linked. And I like to focus on the root causes of settler colonialism, imperialism, which means war, sanctions, international aggression, state violence, all of that, which I don't have this listed here, but is because of capitalism. Imperialism comes from that, and profits for capitalists. Poverty, lack of resources for people, for working class people, housing, food, water, healthcare, domestic state violence, as well as abroad, preventable and unnecessary worldwide suffering and trauma, mass incarceration. This is just a little bit about me and my interests. So this is what I said that I was going to talk a little bit more about. What does it mean to be a Jew? What is the definition of Jewish? And obviously, we are asking these questions because Israel is a nation state that calls itself the Jewish state, right? Israel says that they represent Jews. They say that they are for Jewish people, that they are a Jewish homeland, right? A Jewish state. So that is why these questions are very relevant because we have to say, well, okay, well, what is a Jew? Well, what Israel says is a Jew might not necessarily be the same, but in general, this is just important for people to understand. A person can be Jewish either by ethnicity, by your ancestry, by your DNA, meaning like your ancestors were Jews, basically. Your ancestors were the people who believed in the religion of Judaism. That's me as an Ashkenazi Jew. Um, so that is what that means by ethnicity. You could trace that back. By religion, meaning obviously you believe in the religion of Judaism and you can be Jewish that way. And then this third one here, you can obviously be both of the above simultaneously. But you don't have to be. You know, you can be one or the other. And we know that there are converts to Judaism, right? So somebody who converted to the religion of Judaism is Jewish by religion, but they would not be Jewish by ethnicity. And I'll just say real quick, you know, I like to explain to people, like me being Jewish, the fact that I'm an atheist, you know, obviously, so I don't go to synagogue, I don't believe in the religion, but I am made aware of the fact that I am Jewish by power structures in society and by obviously, for example, the Holocaust. I would have been killed by Nazis. The fact that an atheist would not have protected me. Nazis would have looked at me and said, "You're a Jew," you know? So I can not care about being a Jew all day long, but there are actual anti Semites, white supremacists, who are going to racialize me as a Jew, right? So, so it is made, I am forced to be made aware of it. And then also, so Nazis, white supremacists see me and people like me and they say you're a Jew, that's your race, and you are inferior because of that, right? Whereas then you have the state, the nation state, the settler colonial state of Israel. Israel also tells me I'm Jewish. And what's interesting is that they say that I am superior because of that. And because they say that I am entitled to certain things merely because I am an ethnic Jew. They say that I can come get citizenship there simply because I'm a Jew by ethnicity. They say that they are my birthright because I am a Jew by ethnicity. So, on the one hand, you have Nazis, white supremacists saying that me and other people like me are inferior based on the fact that we're Jewish. And then you have Israel saying that we are superior based on the fact that we are Jewish. So it's real interesting. So that is why I am forced to care about the fact that I'm Jewish, even though it's just a fact of my DNA. It wouldn't be a big deal to me, but here you go. So ethnic Jews, those of us who are Jewish by ethnicity, talking a little bit about that here. We Jews are a diaspora. The reason that we are a diaspora, which means We live all around the world. We are spread out all around the world. We are far from the only diaspora, but we are a diaspora. There are other groups of people who are also a diaspora. But we were made a diaspora beginning around 63 AD. At that time, and in the years leading up to it as well, it wasn't just then, but around that time, um, Jews were forced to flee the Roman Empire. And so that is when the Jewish diaspora was formed. So, around 2000 or so years ago, give or take a few, but around that time. There are three types of ethnic Jews. I mentioned that I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. Ashkenazi Jews come from Northern and Eastern Europe in terms of the diaspora. After fleeing the Roman Empire, as I just mentioned, and becoming this diaspora, the Ashkenazi Jews settled in Northern and Eastern Europe. And primarily it was Ashkenazi Jews who founded the state of Israel, by the way. It was Ashkenazi Jews who created Zionism as an ideology in the first place. So it was mostly Ashkenazi Jews that were starting Israel in the first place. So there's Ashkenazi Jews, there are Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews settled in Spain and Portugal, also known as the Iberian Peninsula. Um, and then Mizrahi Jews are the Jews who stayed in the Middle East region and North Africa. And I was gonna play a little TikTok here for you, but I don't know if I'm gonna have time, so I'm not going to. But it's I don't know if you've seen Katie, or Sexuality Scholar is her name on TikTok. She is also an Ashkenazi Jew, and she talks a lot about these things as well. She has a video on TikTok where she talks about Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews and Mizrahi Jews, but it's basically just what I explained about the locations where we had settled. The history of anti-Semitism. So the word anti-Semitism, it means something very specific. And you will see I'm spelling it here with a lowercase s and as one word. And the reason is that's commonly how you're going to see it spelled when you are referring specifically to this concept that I'm going to describe right here. So anti-Semitism is a specific European Christian creation whereby Jews are seen and treated as an entirely different, inferior racial group. Now, hopefully, you all know this, but race is a social construct. And so that is why, you have these white European Christians that are looking at Jews. And even though, for example, of course, I'm white. Obviously, you look at me, you see a white woman. And so, but the fact that we Ashkenazi Jews have light skin, and because like I said, for 2000 years we were living, us Ashkenazi Jews living in Europe, and so we certainly tend to look like white people. But at this term anti-Semitism is about these white Westerners, European Christians, not wanting to see us as white people, basically seeing us as a completely separate group, a separate racial group. The term anti-Semitism was coined in 1879 by German journalist and Jew hater Wilhelm Marr. So before 1879, hatred of Jewish people was called Judenhass. So he creates this entirely new word. And the reason he created that word is because Wilhelm Marr coined this term, anti-Semitism, because he viewed Jewish people as not only belonging to a religion, but also belonging to a race. Therefore, in an attempt to justify anti-Jewish beliefs and tropes, Marr came up with the idea that Jewish people belonged to a so-called inferior Semitic race. And for this reason, Wilhelm Marr is widely considered to be the father of modern anti-Semitism. And certainly, I think you probably have been seeing more and more people talking about the fact that Palestinians are also Semitic, and that is absolutely true. They are. They're definitely Semitic, and it has to do with the Semitic languages. And so, but that is why this term anti Semitism is so commonly used to mean specifically anti Jewish. But again, I just think it's really important for us to understand who created this term, who created this concept, this view about Jews. It's a very specific thing. And I just think we have to understand this is about white supremacy. And so that is where that comes from, is seeing white Christians as being at the top and then seeing Jews as being lower. And that's where that comes from. Wilhelm Marr was particularly fixated on his hatred of Jews. For him and other anti Semites, it was about the typical anti Jewish or anti Semitic, as we know them, tropes that Nazis are known to have believed and promoted about Jews. All of the typical anti Jewish, anti Semitic tropes that you can think of today originated with Christian Europeans. That's just a fact. These anti Semitic, anti Jewish tropes are still widely believed to this day, widely believed by neo Nazis, anti Semitic white supremacists. And I'm sure everyone here can instantly have these ideas in their heads about what do I mean when I say these anti-Semitic tropes? Well, I think you probably know. We've all heard them. So anti-Semitism is about Jews being used as scapegoats. So being used as scapegoats for society's problems. And it's just the same way racism in general has been useful for rich capitalists at the top because they are not the ones getting blamed for any problems in society. It's useful for them, the rich, powerful people, to have a minority to be used as a scapegoat, and then they're not the ones getting blamed. So anti-Semitism is comes along as this idea that Jews are the scapegoats, Jews are the ones to blame, and they are this inferior racial group. So then I asked here at the bottom, but this is, and we're not going to, talk about this right now for time reasons, but just something to think about. What are some anti-Semitic tropes that you've heard or seen? And so I asked that just because those all originated with white Westerners, Christian Europeans. And it's not to throw any specific group of people under the bus. Obviously, not all white Westerners, not all Christian Europeans hate Jews. Obviously not. But this is just a fact that this is where the anti-Semitism comes from. And still to this day, it really is a white supremacist ideology. And it serves that purpose of enabling white supremacist views. And so when they talk about those anti-Semitic beliefs about Jews, controlling everything in society and basically believing that Jews pull all the strings and it's all a conspiracy, that we're trying to destroy Western culture, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously then all these other things being, controlling the money, being tight with money, but it's a lot of it is the plotting Jew, right? Just that whole conspiratorial thing. It's just about Jews being the useful scapegoats for everything that is wrong with society. So that is anti-Semitism. It is a very specific thing. So now let's talk about the origins of Zionism. Okay, we talked about anti-Semitism. Now we're going to talk about Zionism. And obviously, I am trying to help everyone to understand that clearly, I am making it abundantly clear that anti Semitism is not anti Zionism. Um, these are obviously completely different things. So we have anti Semitism, which I just discussed. Now let's talk about what is Zionism. So Theodor Herzl was an Austro Hungarian secular Ashkenazi Jew who created the concept of modern day Zionism in 1896. Because of anti Semitism in Europe, Herzl wanted Jews to have their own state in Palestine. In 1896, Theodor Herzl published the pamphlet Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state, in which he elaborated his vision for the creation of a Jewish state. His ideas attracted international attention. Herzl's idea of a Jewish state was an idea of an ethno state. His definition of being a Jew was to be born to Jewish parents and of Jewish ancestors. To him, it was about an ethnicity, just like how I just described. How the same way that I'm Jewish as an Ashkenazi Jew, that's the same way that Theodor Herzl was Jewish. He was secular. He did not believe in the religion of Judaism, just like I don't. But he wants to create this Jewish state. So, what does that look like? Well, that's an ethno state because he's not saying he wants it to be religious. He doesn't care if somebody believes in the religion of Judaism or not. He just, at that time, he knows he's the victim of anti Semitism and he wants to escape anti Semitism. But so he's talking about an ethno state. Theodor Herzl believed that it is the mere presence of Jews in non Jewish societies that caused anti Semitism. He blamed the Jews themselves for the anti Semitism of non Jews in Western nations. In Der Judenstaat, Herzl wrote, quote, "The unfortunate Jews are now carrying the seeds of anti Semitism into England. They have already introduced it into America." Now, I would think that any other Jew would be deeply offended by this because it's victim blaming, right? He's basically saying that it's our fault for being there. And I I was thinking too as I'm putting this presentation together, it kind of reminds me of like blaming a victim of rape and saying, "Oh, well, how short was your skirt? You wore a short skirt, so it's your fault." Because it's just very strange, right? And you don't hear people talk about this a lot, but that was his view, was that basically this is what we get for being there. We shouldn't be there among non-Jews. Of course they're going to hate us. That's essentially, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but that's how it sounds to me as I have been reading about about his views. In 1897, Theodor Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress in Switzerland. He began a series of diplomatic initiatives to build support for a Jewish state. At the Sixth Zionist Congress in 1903, Herzl presented the Uganda Scheme, endorsed by Colonel Secretary Joseph Chamberlain. Or I'm sorry, did I just say Colonel? That's so silly. Colonial. Not Colonel. Colonial. This time we're talking about being colonizers and it's colonial. The colonial secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, on behalf of the British government. Yes, it makes sense that he's very colonial in this context about going somewhere else. So the Uganda Scheme proposal sought to create a Jewish state in British East Africa, but it was rejected. British East Africa is at that time Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Hence why he is the colonial secretary, because there you go. It's the British colonial rule in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So, a lot of people don't know about this, that Theodore Herzl presented this idea of creating the Jewish state in Uganda, in Africa. Like, a lot of people don't realize that that was ever discussed, but it was discussed very seriously, but it was rejected. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the idea of Jews constituting a nation rather than a people who believe in the religion of Judaism elicited fierce opposition within European Orthodox Jewish communities. This was especially true because Zionism as a movement was led by secular Jews. And I'm sorry, I didn't read the title at the top here of this particular slide. This is about early anti Zionist Jews. And this is important to understand because as long as there has been Zionism, there have been anti Zionist Jews. So you're probably seeing lately more and more anti Zionist Jews speaking up, advocating for Palestine, speaking against the state of Israel. But this is nothing new. Ever since Theodore Herzl first started writing about Zionism, first started talking about Zionism, as long as this idea about Jews going to Palestine and creating a Jewish state was around, as long as it existed, there have been anti Zionist Jews. And so, again, as I just read, it was actually something that a lot of Jews fiercely opposed, specifically within the European Orthodox Jewish communities. They saw that Zionism at that time was being led by secular Jews. And then the creation of a Jewish state before the appearance of the Messiah, it was widely interpreted in Jewish religious circles as contradicting the divine will. So for those Orthodox Jews, they opposed Zionism because of their religious beliefs, because of Judaism. And there are still certainly Orthodox Jews like that today who are anti-Zionist, and you probably have seen some of them. And there's definitely I've seen they have a large following on social media, and they make videos talking about this. But there are definitely religious Orthodox Jews who are strongly opposed to the state of Israel because they believe it goes against the religion of Judaism, goes against the Torah, and to have a Jewish state, that you're not supposed to do that. And then continuing on about early anti-Zionist Jews, in addition to those religious Jews who were anti-Zionist, there were also certainly many secular Jews who opposed Zionism as well. And they did so because they felt most at home in the countries that they were living in. They did not view anti-Semitism as the norm among the non-Jewish majority in those countries. And they just, they wanted to stay where they were living. They didn't think it was necessary to leave. In his essay, and I didn't look up how to pronounce this, but Moschel, in that essay, Theodore Herzl called Jews who opposed his project Yids, which meant not true Jews. So Theodore Herzl called anti-Zionist Jews not true Jews. Yids is basically his slur, I guess, for anti-Zionist Jews at that time. And in this article, his essay, Moschel, this article has often been perceived to be emblematic of an anti-Semitic strain of thinking in Zionism. And it has also been described as an anti-Semitic rant. So it's interesting. And we don't hear a lot of people talk about that nowadays, but that There have been throughout time since the beginning of Zionism, people saying that Zionism actually felt anti-Semitic. And so that's always been something that many anti-Zionist Jews have been talking about. So here you have Theodor Herzl saying that if you don't agree with me about creating a Jewish state, then you're a Yid. You're not a real Jew. So this quote you may have heard before. Quote, a land without a people for a people without a land. By the early 1900s, many Zionists had popularized that slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land, regarding Palestine being colonized and turned into a Jewish state. But of course, Palestine was not a land without a people. Palestinians were living there while Zionists were discussing their plans to take over and to create their own Jewish state. So we can definitely go ahead and say this was a lie. That was definitely it was not a land without a people. Palestinians existed. They were living there in Palestine at that time, even though they were being erased and ignored and just completely. The Zionists were pretending as though they just simply didn't even exist. So now let's talk a little bit about Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is the belief that the return of Jews to the Holy Land of the Levant region in the Middle East is a prerequisite for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Christian Zionists believe that the Jews in Israel will get killed at the time of the rapture and will burn in hell, whereas they believe all of the Christians will ascend into heaven to meet Jesus. And there are a lot of Christian Zionists. In fact, the majority of Zionists in the world are Christians. And certainly throughout the West, the Zionists who hold the power are overwhelmingly Christian. And they are certainly the ones who are overwhelmingly funding Israel and giving Zionism its power. So that's something that's important to remember. So there are various reasons why non-Jews might be Zionist, and I'll talk about that. But this is one reason why someone who is not Jewish might be Zionist if they are Christian and they believe in this biblical prophecy that they need the Jews to be there. But certainly, I wouldn't say that this is in any way about caring about the Jewish people or having a love for the Jewish people, since that is they're believing that the rapture will happen and those Jews will get killed and those Jews will burn in hell. Just, it's kind of worth mentioning and remembering that is what those Christian Zionists believe. Anti-Semitic Zionists. Anti-Semitic Zionists are people who support the state of Israel for anti-Semitic reasons. Historically, this type of anti-Semitism has been most notable among Christian Zionists who may perpetrate religious anti-Semitism, which I just talked about. Many people in the political far right in Europe and in the United States may support the Zionist movement merely because they want to expel Jews from their countries. Anti Semites might see Zionism as the easiest way to get rid of the Jews from their countries. So there are a lot of anti Semitic Zionists, no doubt about it. It's just that's a lot of the time it seems that there are Zionists who really don't believe that we Jews belong anywhere else, and that's the only place for us is Israel, and that we should just go there. Um, and so that is actually more common than a lot of people realize. Let's talk about the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917. This was during World War I. And it was the Balfour Declaration was announcing the British government's support for the establishment of, quote, a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The term national home had no precedent in international law and was intentionally vague. The intended boundaries of Palestine were not specified in the Balfour Declaration. The British government later confirmed that the words in Palestine meant that the Jewish national home was not intended to cover all of Palestine. So, Balfour Declaration is British government saying this is what we want to do. We want to help create a Jewish state, basically, but they called it a national home for the Jewish people, and they specified in Palestine. Arthur Balfour was a well-known Protestant anti-Semite. A little bit of interesting information about him. Prior to the Balfour Declaration in 1905, Arthur Balfour had sponsored the Aliens Act, a bill to prevent East European Jews fleeing pogroms from immigrating to England. So, yeah, pretty anti-Semitic guy. Let's talk about Edwin Montagu. He was the only Jewish member of Britain's parliament in 1917 when they passed the Balfour Declaration. Edwin Montagu was an anti-Zionist Jew. He strongly opposed Zionism, which he called, quote, a mischievous political creed. Montagu opposed the Balfour Declaration of 1917. Again, he was the only Jewish member of Britain's parliament at that time, and he opposed the Balfour Declaration. He considered Zionism to be anti-Semitic. Regarding the Balfour Declaration, he wrote, quote, I wish to place on record my view that the policy of His Majesty's government is anti-Semitic, and it will prove a rallying ground for anti-Semites in every country in the world. Now let's talk about Haganah and Irgun. These were early Zionist terrorist organizations. Haganah and Irgun were two separate Zionist terrorist paramilitary organizations that operated in Palestine while Palestine was under British control. Both of those Zionist terrorist organizations existed to colonize Palestine for the purpose of creating and maintaining the Zionist Jewish settlements in Palestine. Haganah and Irgun bombed bridges, railways, and ships. They committed many terrorist acts against Palestinians. They were later absorbed into the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. So this is the history of the IDF. That is how the IDF began. A little bit more about Haganah and Irgun. Albert Einstein, in a letter to the New York Times in 1948, compared Irgun to, quote, Nazi and fascist parties and described it as, quote, a terrorist, right-wing, chauvinist organization. Irgun was described as a terrorist organization by the United Nations, British, and United States governments in media such as the New York Times newspaper and by the Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry, the 1946 Zionist Congress, even, and the Jewish Agency. So, pretty well established that Irgun was absolutely a terrorist organization. In 1940, the Haganah sabotaged the Patria, an ocean liner being used by the British to deport 1,800 Jews to Mauritius with a bomb intended to cripple the ship. However, the ship sank, killing 267 people and injuring 172. So that is what the Haganah did. They killed all of those Jews. I have to reiterate that for that to sink in. And again, I said that there were a lot of people who were saying that they thought Zionism was anti-Semitism. You can do with this information what you will, but they literally bombed a ship with 1,800 Jews on it and killed 267 of those people, injured 172. So, resurrection of the Hebrew language. Hebrew was essentially a dead language when Zionists chose to revive it by forcing other Jews to learn it and speak it within the Zionist project in Palestine. Yiddish was the most commonly spoken language among Jews who came to Palestine to try to create the Zionist Jewish state project. But Zionists violently suppressed Yiddish and any other languages that were spoken by the Jewish diaspora who had come to Palestine. In the 1920s and 30s, Zionists used intimidation and violence against Jews who spoke Yiddish, including attacking theater performances that were in Yiddish and closing down Yiddish publications. Collaboration between Zionists and Nazis. Beginning in 1933, Zionists secretly collaborated with the German Nazi regime to increase the inflow of German Jewish immigrants and capital to Palestine. This was during a time when many Jews and Jewish organizations were demanding a boycott of Nazi Germany. So, again, just to reiterate, you have Nazis who have risen to power and Jewish organizations, obviously getting very scared and demanding boycotts of Nazis, of Germany, of Nazi Germany. And Zionists were secretly working with Nazis. This is a fact. They tried to keep it secret, but we now know. So then I wanted to read this quote here by Theodore Herzl that was in his diary from the Complete Diaries of Theodore Herzl, Volume 1. He had said, "The anti-Semites will become our most dependable friends. The anti-Semitic countries are allies. We want to emigrate as respected people." So, obviously, that quote seemed very relevant to me. That he was saying anti Semites will be our most dependable friends and our allies. And then here you have Zionists secretly collaborating with Nazis for the purpose of trying to create a Jewish state, create the state of Israel in Palestine. Post-Holocaust. So, of course, between 1939 and 1945, the Nazis killed approximately 6 million Jews. Obviously, that is the Holocaust that I'm referring to. World War II ended on September 2nd, 1945. Illegal migration, which to Palestine, so illegal migration of Jews to Palestine is referred to as Aliyah Bet. So that became the main form of Jewish entry into Palestine after the Holocaust, was illegally migrating there. Zionists systematically smuggled Jews in and were widely encouraging mass migration of Jews into Palestine in an effort to win. Is someone asking saying something, or I
No.
can only okay, I heard somebody. I can only see my screen.
But
Um
it is a 3:45 just to give you a heads
okay.
up.
Okay, thank you. Um okay, in an effort to win independence, Zionists waged a guerrilla war against the British who held colonial rule over Palestine. On July 22nd, 1946, Irgun bombed the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, which had been used as the British administrative headquarters for Mandatory Palestine. This is commonly considered to have been a terrorist attack by Irgun. 91 people of various nationalities were killed, including 15 Jews. 46 people were injured. On April 2nd, 1947, the UK requested that the quote, question of Palestine be addressed by the UN General Assembly. The General Assembly created a committee called the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine for this purpose. In July of 1947, they visited Palestine and they met with Jewish and Zionist delegations. And I say Jewish and Zionist because there were Jews at that time that didn't necessarily want to create a Jewish state. They just wanted to live there in Palestine. Not all Jews there were trying to colonize and take over and make a Jewish state. The Arab Higher Committee boycotted those meetings, not feeling that it was appropriate to have these meetings at all, not wanting to legitimize those meetings because it's certainly they were already living there. I think that we can see that as reasonable, and we can perhaps understand why they might have felt that way. Zionists settler colonial project of Israel gets the green light to be considered an official nation state. So the UNSCOP proposed an independent Arab state, an independent Jewish state, and the city of Jerusalem, the last to be under an international trusteeship system. On November 29th, 1947, the General Assembly adopted their report, but with slight modifications. So, again, the UN is saying we propose an independent Arab state, independent Jewish state, and then the city of Jerusalem under international trusteeship system. So then we have the Nakba. And I hope you have heard about the Nakba before. But the word Nakba in Arabic means catastrophe, or it also means disaster. Between 1947 and 1949, Zionist military forces attacked major Palestinian cities. Zionists destroyed about 530 Palestinian villages and massacred around 15,000 Palestinians. This was done in a series of mass atrocities. International law says refugees have the right to return from where they've been displaced. But Palestinians have not been allowed to return. Many Palestinians still to this day have hope of returning to their land in Palestine that they were forced to flee. So, here I just want to talk about this. What does the word indigenous mean? Having genetic roots that go back 2,000 plus years to a region is not equivalent to being considered indigenous to a region. The word indigenous does not merely mean having genetic ties. Indigenous refers to a people with a shared culture that has evolved from being in the same place continuously over the years since before colonizers came in to steal the land with violence. Indigenous is much more than an ancestry or lineage that one can trace back. The word indigenous has existed as a juxtaposition to contrast with colonizers. The indigenous people were already there, and then the colonizers came in. So it's not simply tracing back your genetic ties. What does the word occupation mean? From Amnesty International, since the occupation first began in June of 1967, Israel's ruthless policies of land confiscation, illegal settlement, and dispossession, coupled with rampant discrimination, have inflicted immense suffering on Palestinians, depriving them of their basic rights. Israel's military rule disrupts every aspect of daily life in the occupied Palestinian territories. It continues to affect whether, when, and how Palestinians can travel to work or school, go abroad, visit their relatives, earn a living, attend a protest, access their farmland, or even access electricity or a clean water supply. It means daily humiliation, fear, and oppression. People's entire lives are effectively held hostage by Israel. Israel has also adopted a complex web of military laws to crush dissent against its policies. And senior government officials have branded Israelis advocating for Palestinian rights as traitors. So, all of this comes directly from Amnesty International. So, you might have heard some people say this quote here at the top. But Israel doesn't occupy Gaza anymore. They withdrew in 2004. I've heard a lot of people say that. Well, that is a myth. That is not exactly accurate because when Israel took their settlements out of Gaza in 2004, that does not mean that Israel ended holding all of the power over everyone in Gaza. And so that's why it remains an occupation. Israel's occupation of Palestine has never ended. Israel has maintained a land, air, and sea blockade on Gaza. This has had a devastating effect on Palestinians' lives. Israel has always been restricting Palestinians' movement and their access to life sustaining resources. Israel has always held full control over every aspect of Palestinians' lives. Israel maintains full control of Gaza's borders, their coastline, and their airspace. Israel's blockade gives it control of Gaza's borders, and due to US and Israeli pressure, the blockade is also enforced by Egypt. The United Nations and independent human rights groups have demanded an end to this blockade, and yet Israel has been ignoring them. But what about the West Bank? We've certainly been hearing a lot about Gaza, of course, since October 7th, and we hear a lot about Hamas. And so before I talk about West Bank, just understand that Hamas is not in the West Bank. Okay. Hamas has only been in Gaza. And so anytime you hear Hamas used as an excuse for any sort of brutality, any sort of oppression against Palestinians, you should know that that would not make any sense in the West Bank. Numerous UN resolutions and the prevailing international opinion hold that Israeli settlements in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights are a violation of international law, including UN Security Council resolutions in 1979, 1980, and 2016. Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention states, quote, the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. It also prohibits the quote, individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as deportations of protected persons from occupied territory. More about the West Bank. This is from a December 12th, 2023 Al Jazeera article. So that was fairly recently, December 12th, 2023. This is an article titled Know Their Names. Hundreds of Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces and settlers in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem in 2023. Quote, at least 275 Palestinians, including 63 children, killed by Israeli forces or armed settlers in the occupied West Bank since the surprise Hamas attack on October 7th. Even, and then also from this article, even it says, even before October 7th, 2023, even before October 7th, 2023 had been the deadliest year on record for Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. So this number that I just read before, about where it says at least 275 Palestinians, including 63 children, were killed by either Israeli forces or armed settlers since October 7th. Well, this was on December 12th, so I'm sure that number must be much higher now. But and something to know as well here, they're saying that this is not simply the IDF. This is not IDF soldiers only. Some of these killings, murders of Palestinians in the West Bank are by IDF soldiers, but a lot of them are simply by settlers, armed settlers. And so these are not even in the military, these people, but they have the full permission of Israel's government. And they have the IDF almost serving as their personal security force, backing them up. So if they kill a Palestinian civilian, that's typically perfectly allowed by the IDF, by Israel's government. It is not something that they're going to be arrested for. How much land has Israel taken from Palestine over the years? So you see 1917, that's before the state of Israel. 1948, after the UN partitions, and you see blue is Israel, green is Palestine. And then here you have 1967. Here you have 1995. And here you see, when you see the red lines, it says under Israeli occupation. And you can see here, it's just, it's getting smaller and smaller. The green is Palestine. So here with these red lines, it's not all green, is it? So it's just less and less and less as the years go by. Israel declares that Israeli citizenship is the, quote, birthright of all Jews around the world. So they're saying that to all of us Jews. They're saying it to me. They tell me that they're my birthright and that I should go there and get citizenship. If the state of Israel deems someone to be Jewish and gives that person citizenship, that person gets full legal human rights. Sometimes people become Israeli citizens as Jews who were not born to Jewish parents, but instead converted to the religion of Judaism at some point in their lives. The common claim made by Zionists is that they are, quote, indigenous to the land. But, and this is me asking this question here, can a person convert to being indigenous? So I asked this question because that is the Zionist claim, right? That is Israel's claim, is that Jews are indigenous to that land, therefore it is theirs. It belongs to them. They are giving citizenship to people who oftentimes don't have a Jewish background even. So if that's going to be their claim, then how would that make sense? Whoops. Wait a minute. Oh no. What just happened? I'm sorry. Let me go back. Let me go back. I apologize.
It's 5 o'clock now. Update.
Okay. I don't think I have a lot more. Am I able to finish?
Yeah, you can
Or
finish. We have
okay.
time.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, I'm wrapping it up here. Okay, here we are. So there is no one specific definition by Israel of what it means to be Jewish. It's usually based on having at least one Jewish grandparent. However, the state of Israel, they can override that even if they want to. The state of Israel can always just decide based on each individual if they will be considered Jewish and if they will be given Israeli citizenship. So the Israeli government makes that decision. They are the arbiters of who is and isn't Jewish, who can get citizenship. So at the bottom, I wanted to make it clear if a Palestinian or any Arab of a Muslim background converts to Judaism, they will most likely be denied citizenship by Israel, which is interesting, right? They convert to Judaism, they're a Jew. So why would Israel say no? They're not very consistent. And there's nowhere on the books where Israel defines who is and who isn't a Jew. What does it mean to be a Jew? Israel doesn't define that. Israel is an ethnicity / race-based society. I have an asterisk that I'll get to here in a minute. Rights are dependent upon whether each person is considered Jewish by the state. From the Council on Foreign Relations, quote, the 1950 Law of Return grants all Jews, as well as their children, grandchildren, and spouses, the right to move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. Non-Jews do not have these rights. Palestinians and their descendants have no legal right to return to the lands that their families held before being displaced in 1948 or 1967. For, quote, Arab Israelis, and I put that in quotes, Arab Israelis, because they are Palestinian. So these are the small number of Palestinians who somehow got lucky enough to be granted citizenship by the state of Israel. And so most Palestinians, that's not them, but there are some Palestinians where that is the case, and they do have Israeli citizenship, but they're not referred to in Israel as Palestinian Israelis. They are referred to in Israel as Arab Israelis because Israel doesn't want to acknowledge that they are Palestinian because then they would be acknowledging Palestine, the land Palestine. So for Arab Israelis, their human rights in Israel are always conditional. Down here, this asterisk, like I said at the top, Israel is an ethnicity, race-based society, ethnicity-based, race-based society. Asterisk at the bottom, ethnicity, and race are social constructs in this context. The state of Israel gets to decide whether each individual should be classified as Jewish or not. Israel's government officials are the arbiters of who is and who isn't Jewish. But aren't 20% of Israel's population Arab Israelis? Don't they have equal rights? Well, Israel passed a law in 2018 declaring that only Jews have the right of self determination in the country, in the state of Israel. It is referred to as the nation state law. From the Reuters article from July 21st, 2022, which is titled Israel's Supreme Court Rules Disloyal Citizens Can Be Stripped of Status, the following quote: Israel's Supreme Court ruled on Thursday that the state can revoke the citizenship of people who carry out actions that constitute a breach of trust against the state, including terrorism, espionage, or treason. There are many cases of Jews in Israel who took part in terror, and not even once has the Interior Ministry thought to appeal to revoke their citizenship, the ACRI's Oded Feller told Reuters. The only cases that were submitted to the court were of Arab citizens. So those Arab Israelis can lose their citizenship. And again, this at the top, just really important to remember that Israel passed that law in 2018 saying only Jews have the right of self-determination. So that is conditional citizenship. To wrap it up, I'm going to leave it with this, because if you are interested in trying to help in some kind of a way, I encourage you to learn more about the BDS movement. BDS is boycott, divestment, sanctions. Boycott is withdrawing support from Israel's apartheid regime. And complicit in Israel, no longer being complicit in Israeli sporting, cultural, and academic institutions, and from all Israeli and international companies engaged in violations of Palestinian human rights. So boycotting all of them, products, goods, services, all of it. Divestment. It's campaigns to urge banks, local councils, churches, pension funds, and universities to withdraw investments from the state of Israel and all Israeli and international companies that sustain Israeli apartheid. Sanctions. These are campaigns to pressure governments to fulfill their legal obligations to end Israeli apartheid and not aid or assist its maintenance by banning businesses with illegal Israeli settlements, ending military trade and free trade agreements, as well as suspending Israel's membership in international forums such as UN bodies and FIFA. And how do I get it? Whoops, sorry. Exit that. So let's see. Am I still sharing? Okay, good. So I just wanted to say that's the end of my slide, but I was going to say that last one about BDS, that is also in line with what was successfully done against South Africa's apartheid regime. And so we have seen it work. And to the people who are very afraid of any sort of violent protests, that would definitely be the nonviolent method to go that route, would be the BDS movement.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions right now? I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you just differentiate what secular and orthodox means?
Sure. Secular just means not religious. So, a person might label themselves an atheist, a person might label themselves agnostic, or they might even be a mild believer. They might believe in a God, but they just don't really practice the religion. They don't really necessarily care about the religion. That's secular. But then Orthodox is more of that conservative religious belief. It's that more strict. Certainly for Jews, they keep kosher. Um, but that's what that means. More of that strict conservative religious beliefs is Orthodox.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Somebody else? You are you able to hear somebody talking?
I barely.
I
Yeah,
can
try
repeat. I
it.
can repeat it, or you can come up.
Okay. Yeah, I could hear a little bit.
So the question was, there's been arguments saying that Jews have indigenous claims to Palestinian lands. Is there any truth to that? Is that the question?
Right. I mean, I addressed what the word indigenous means. And so certainly you're asking my opinion. I would say no. Um, but here's the thing. This is what I've been talking a lot about. It would be one thing um, for um, for Jews to go to Palestine as immigrants who have respect and deference for the Palestinians living there in Palestine, respecting that this is Palestine and that is is she saying so? Okay, respecting that this is Palestine, and that I wish to live here among Palestinians, and so that and you respect the culture and you respect the people and all of these things. You have deference for them and for the land and all of that and the culture. That's perfectly fine, and there would be no reason to have a problem with that. But to say that you're going to go there to conquer, to take over, to commit horrific acts of violence against people that are living there, and to say this belongs to me now, this is mine now, my land for my people, and I'm going to keep out your kind, basically, native people who have already been living there. You cannot enter. I do violence against you. I steal this land from you, and you don't get to come here. And then I continue doing violence against you for 76 years now, plus. I mean, obviously, I don't know how someone could defend that, but of course we see people defending it constantly. But for me personally, no, that makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever, because as I said in my presentation, it, even we're not I don't think we Jews are indigenous merely because 2000 plus years ago we can trace back our lineage there. But even if somehow you want to say that, um, that doesn't give you a right to steal land from other people and to do violence, to commit violence against other people.
Other questions? Looks like that's the last question. Do you have any uh maybe final words, or like plug your stuff if you want?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to see so many people interested in learning more about this, more about Palestine and their history, about Palestinians, about the Zionist state of Israel, and all of these things. So I love seeing that. So yeah, I mean, I'm just a person. I don't have any books that I'm writing or anything like that. Maybe one day, but I do. I am active on social media and I talk about these things a lot. And so on Instagram, I am Sally Hates Capitalism. And on Twitter, which I am still calling it Twitter, whether Elon likes it or not. I am just hates capitalism. And I have a Sally Hates Capitalism Facebook page that I created as well. I on YouTube, Sally Hates Capitalism, and then I have 2 different TikTok accounts because they keep banning anything with the word Zionist and Israel. They're real picky and they like to ban, and that's what's funny too about the government wants to ban TikTok and they say it's Chinese. It's not even Chinese anymore because they have a US subsidiary running everything. They're clearly very US at this point. So anyway, so I'm Sally Hates Capitalism 2 and I'm Sally Hates Capitalism 4. I got those 2 accounts because my 1 and my 3 are no more. So I go between both of those accounts. But yeah, there you have it.
Oh, we got one question.
Is there any way we can access the PowerPoint? Because it would be nice to have some of those specific names and dates for future discussion with people.
Would you be comfortable with sharing the slides to the audience? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you just email them to me, I'll share it to them.
Sounds good. Sure thing.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we'll do a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and, providing this presentation. It's definitely important, I think, to talk about this because, we have to make these distinctions so that people are more informed.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Should we, okay. All right. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Rev. It was nice
Okay.
to meet you here.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
right.
Have a good
Take
day.
care.
Bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.